Welcome to the Spy Collection. I'm Anastasios and today we have a book that will allow us to talk about a not so well known spy story. This one, titled Syria, Fragile Mosaic of Power, originally printed in 1987 and reprinted in 2002 by the University Press of the Pacific. Unfortunately, we haven't found an original 87 copy of it yet, so this one is one of those 2002 reprinted ones. Here is how its author, Martha Neff Kessler, closes her very insightful preface, again in 1987. Attention to Syria would contribute to a more effective pursuit of virtually every major US interest in the Middle East. The fortunes of the Soviet Union in the region rely in the near term on its key relationship with Syria, and 2. The possibility of confrontation in the region between the United States and the Soviet Union hinges largely on Syrian actions. Few knowledgeable observers would deny Syria's importance to the region's stability. Peace in Lebanon and between the Arabs and Israelis will finally require Syria's participation and acceptance. And Syria, by virtue of history and its key location, will play an important role in the evolution of Arab attitudes toward the accommodation of US and Western interests in the region. Let's take a small pause here and jump to a snippet of a recent interview between two former CIA officers with, overall, very opposing views. Andrew Bustamante, who expresses mainly pro-CIA perspectives, and John Kiriakou, who typically does the opposite.
One, this is the way our government works. Mm-hmm. What is true in CIA is true in Department of State, is true in Department of Energy, is true in the Department of the Interior, the DNI, the DHS, FBI, and everybody who's in those worlds knows it. And everybody who's not in those worlds thinks that somehow we promote from within based on meritorious service and outstanding accomplishment and outstanding achievement, and that the American government gets this reputation in movies and books that somehow these organizations are super elite.
Right.
We are not. The most talented people leave or get forced out because the only way that you climb to the top is by becoming a company person, by acknowledging and accepting and being grandfathered and godfathered. It's not based on your meritorious service. It's not based on what you accomplish. It's based on who you know and the politics within each building and your ability to work within those politics. And this is a fantastic example of the director of CIA when, like, the leadership of that role fired a recognized expert that could actually move the dial to benefit American national security interests. But out of personal spite, sent her somewhere else.
There's a famous quote by Gamal.
Alright, keep in mind what they mentioned, because this book will give us a practical example of that. Now back to the artifact. This little book contains an impressive amount of knowledge of Syria through the eyes of the US intelligence community, even for today's standards. So we highly recommend it to anyone interested in the topic, if you are lucky enough to find a copy of it. But strangely, the bio of the author is only a couple of sentences long. Martha Neff Kessler wrote this book while a senior fellow at the National Defense University. She is a career intelligence officer with the National Intelligence Council in Washington, D.C., where she has been a senior Middle East specialist. Her BA degree is from Denison University, and her MA degree is from Western Michigan University. Mrs. Kessler has received the National Intelligence Community's Medal of Achievement. As we read in this declassified CIA description of that award, signed by William Casey, the then DCI, the National Intelligence Medal of Achievement may be awarded for especially meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding service to the United States by a member of the intelligence community. This award recognizes performance of an especially difficult duty in a clearly exceptional manner. The service being recognized must relate directly to the intelligence community's mission to provide the intelligence required for national security policy determinations. So this book is written by a US intelligence officer with deep expertise, and that is also immediately obvious for anyone that has read it. But what's the spy story behind that? Remember the discussion between Andrew Bustamante and John Kiriakou, and also that this book was published in 1987. With that, let's hear from former CIA intelligence officer John Kiriakou himself an interesting story about its author.
Did you ever work with him?
I worked in the same office, but we didn't do operations.
Did you meet him?
Oh, yeah.
What was he like?
Oh, Brennan?
Yeah.
Oh, I've known Brennan since 1990.
What was he like? From the lowest in the 90s, where he didn't yet have a lot of power, or maybe he did.
Okay, I'll tell you a story that I've never told publicly.
Go for it.
So when I got hired, John was a GS-14 nobody. He was the deputy director of the Arab-Israeli analysis group. And he worked for a woman who was really one of the great minds, the great thinkers on Syria. And they didn't get along. He had been sort of imposed on her. And so he went to her one day and said, I think I'm ready for promotion. I'm ready for the senior intelligence service, and I'd like your blessing. Her name was Martha Kessler. Kessler. So she said, not only are you not ready for the senior service, I don't even want you to work for me anymore. You're fired. Well, at the CIA, if you're fired, you're not really fired. You have 6 weeks to walk the halls and find another job. And if you can't find a job in 6 weeks, any job, then they escort you out, they take your badge, and you're actually fired. So this happened right around Christmas. There are no jobs open at Christmas. The job turnover is in the summer. So he's having a heck of a time finding a job. Finally, he goes to the PDB staff, the President's Daily Brief. And it just so happens that they have an opening for a briefer for the lowest ranking person on the National Security Council who's entitled to a PDB briefing. That is the Director of Intelligence Programs. That just happened to be, at the time, George Tenet. So Brennan and Tenet immediately hit it off. They are both alpha dogs, cigar smoking, hard drinking, pockmark faced, guys. Hit it off totally. And wouldn't you know, George gets promoted to become the deputy director of the CIA. He becomes the deputy director, and he names John the director of the Office of Near Eastern and South Asian Analysis, Martha's boss. He calls Martha into the office and he says, now you're fired. And she retired. The office was reorganized, and so John got squeezed out, but George made him station chief in Riyadh. Now, this is a guy who has not had 5 seconds of operational experience in his life, who's now the station chief in one of the most important countries in the world for the CIA.
Sadly, Martha Kessler, one of the top Syria experts in CIA, passed away on December 4th, 2023, at the age of 78. More recently, on February 26th, 2024, her daughter published this article. Of course, we have a link to it in the video's description. The article primarily focuses on anti-Semitism and how it remains a major threat, but also has some other interesting insights. Let's read a few words from it. My mother took her duty to remain impartial seriously. Her job was to analyze intelligence so lawmakers could make informed decisions. She once told Ronald Reagan she thought we might lose Sadat, who was then a partner in negotiating peace with Israel. Lose him? Reagan asked, stunned. Not long after that, Anwar Sadat was assassinated. In her words, she was paid to intuit things. Passing along her biases would not only have been a violation of her professional ethics, it could have been a poor way to go about her job, since assassins in Egypt don't care what analysts in Langley think, and yet she always carried a trait of sympathy for the Palestinians. She told me once she was considered by her colleagues to be an Arabist, someone who overly identified with the Arab players in the region and was, at some level, hostile to Israel. Checks out, I thought to myself. At her funeral, her colleagues extolled her career. She could read the late Syrian dictator Hafez Assad's mind. She'd been instrumental in the Madrid and Oslo peace talks. She always said that shedding light on the interests of the Arab players in the region was her contribution to the peace process. I spoke to John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, a few days before the funeral. When I asked him whether my mother was an Arabist, he quickly shot down the idea. He acknowledged there was a need for greater even-handedness towards the region among some in the CIA, but, he said, she was not among them, and anyway, that was more of an issue on the political side than it was with analysts, the lion's share of whom remained unbiased. I asked Brennan about my mother's mentor, Bob Ames, who had an infamously close relationship with Ali Hassan Salameh, the leader of the Black September PLO terrorist command and architect of the Munich Olympics massacre. He laughed. Ames was, he admitted, very close to the Palestinians, and played it very close to the edge. But after his death in the Beirut embassy bombing of 1983, Brennan said, the culture within the CIA changed from being operational driven to being driven by the analysts. Spies who cultivated terrorist assets no longer set the tone. The baton had passed to the wonks in Langley. Bob Ames' biographer, Kai Bird, had a different view of whether Bob Ames was an Arabist. Unequivocally, yes, he told me, but there were two reasons for it. As with journalists, Ames and his colleagues were merely reporting what they saw. When I asked what he meant, he told me that Israel is the only reason for anti-Semitism in the Arab world. Before 1948, the anti-Semitism in Cairo and Beirut was on par with what would you see in New York and Los Angeles. That last part is an interesting reference because this book here is also in memory of Bob Ames. See here. In conclusion, we hope this little book opened up a different view into CIA from the not so widely known internal spy politics to how it's not usually the brightest officers that get to rise to the top ranks, or most importantly, a tiny glimpse into who was Martha Kessler, the author of our today's artifact, which is a great example of how nothing is as it seems.